In the city of Fairview, Officer Jack Nolan has built his career on enforcing the law with unwavering resolve. Known for his tough, no-nonsense approach, Jack's world is turned upside down when he mistakenly arrests Dr. Marcus Thompson, the newly appointed police chief with a mission to reform the department. As Jack faces the shocking realization of his own biases, he is drawn into a dangerous web of corruption within the force, one that is determined to destroy Marcus and his vision for change. With time running out and enemies lurking in the shadows, Jack must decide where his true loyalty lies. Will he continue down a path of destruction, or will he risk everything to protect the man he once wronged? In this gripping tale of redemption, justice, and the high cost of uncovering the truth, the line between right and wrong is blurred, and one man's journey will lead him to a revelation that could change everything. Officer Jack Nolan, rugged, muscular build with a military-style crew cut and piercing blue eyes. Jack's strict adherence to protocol begins to crack as he faces the consequences of his actions. Dr. Marcus Thompson, tall, athletic, with dark skin and a calm, commanding presence. Marcus's dignity under arrest hints at his strength and leadership. Officer Sam Whitaker, lean, with sandy blonde hair and a youthful, eager demeanor. Sam is torn between admiration for Jack and unease with the arrest. Corner of 4th and Maple, a busy, diverse intersection where the arrest takes place. The scene is chaotic, filled with the sounds of the city, and represents the beginning of the story's conflict. Officer Jack Nolan. Jack's shock is evident in his body language, stiff, pale, as he realizes his mistake. His internal conflict begins to manifest outwardly. Dr. Marcus Thompson, calm and composed, even as he reveals his identity as the new police chief. Marcus's authority and wisdom start to come to the forefront. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez, sturdy, athletic, with sharp green eyes. Lisa's no-nonsense attitude is softened by her supportive nature towards Marcus. Fairview Police Department headquarters. The station is buzzing with activity. The building's outdated interior contrasts with the modern crisis unfolding inside, as Marcus's true identity is revealed, shocking the department. Officer Jack Nolan. His usual confidence is shaken. Jack is visibly nervous and uncertain. His rugged exterior is beginning to show cracks. Dr. Marcus Thompson. Marcus's demeanor is both firm and understanding as he confronts Jack in private. He remains an imposing figure, but shows a compassionate side. Lieutenant Richard Rick Carter, bulky, with graying hair and steely gray eyes. Rick's skepticism of Marcus's reforms starts to become apparent. Marcus's office, a modest space with personal touches, like family photos and a commendation plaque. The quiet of the office contrasts with the tension in the station, serving as a place for candid, crucial conversations. Officer Jack Nolan. Jack's internal struggle deepens, his appearance more haggard as he questions his actions. His military precision starts to falter. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez. Steadfast and supportive, Lisa's sharp eyes convey her awareness of the department's shifting dynamics. She becomes a confidant for Jack. Lieutenant Richard Rick Carter. Rick is increasingly seen as a shadowy figure, his presence menacing as he begins to orchestrate resistance against Marcus. Fairview Police Department headquarters, briefing room. A tense atmosphere fills the room as Marcus begins implementing reforms. The setting is stark and institutional, reflecting the rigid mindset that Marcus is trying to change. Officer Jack Nolan. Jack shows signs of growth, his rigid demeanor softening as he begins to work with Marcus. His military-style haircut contrasts with his increasingly introspective nature. Dr. Marcus Thompson. Marcus's leadership qualities shine, his calm authority guiding Jack through the first steps of reform. Officer Sam Whitaker. Sam remains a supportive yet conflicted figure, eager to learn but struggling with the tension between Jack and Marcus. The community center, a welcoming space filled with bright colors and an air of inclusivity. This setting is where Jack first sees the positive impact of Marcus's reforms, contrasting sharply with the tense atmosphere of the police station. Officer Jack Nolan. Jack becomes more alert and determined, his rugged appearance now marked by a sense of purpose. His eyes show a new clarity as he uncovers the conspiracy. Lieutenant Richard Rick Carter. Rick's true nature as a manipulative and power-hungry officer is revealed. His physical presence remains imposing, but his motives are now seen as dangerous. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez. Lisa's protective and strategic instincts are highlighted as she becomes more involved in helping Jack navigate the growing dangers. The abandoned warehouse. A decaying, isolated structure on the outskirts of the city, symbolizing the moral decay within the department. The warehouse is where the conspiracy reaches its peak, with its eerie, silent atmosphere reflecting the dangers that Jack and Marcus face. Officer Jack Nolan. Jack is now fully transformed, his appearance more determined and focused than ever. His rugged exterior is matched by a newfound inner strength. Dr. Marcus Thompson. Marcus's calm leadership is unwavering as he faces the final challenge. His physical presence is steady, commanding respect and guiding Jack through the climax. Lieutenant Richard Rick Carter. Rick is exposed as the mastermind behind the conspiracy. His once imposing figure is now seen as desperate and dangerous, his powers slipping away. The abandoned warehouse, climactic scene. The setting takes on an even more sinister tone during the final confrontation. The dark, echoing halls of the warehouse become a battleground where the truth is finally brought to light, and the fate of the department hangs in the balance. Officer Jack Nolan. Jack's appearance is more relaxed and self-assured. He is no longer the rigid enforcer, but a more compassionate and thoughtful officer, ready to continue his journey. Dr. Marcus Thompson. Marcus remains a pillar of strength, his calm demeanor now coupled with the satisfaction of seeing his reforms begin to take root. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez. Lisa is resolute and confident, having played a crucial role in the events that unfolded. Her green eyes reflect the hard-earned victory and the work that still lies ahead. Fairview Police Department Headquarters Briefing Room. Post-reform, the atmosphere has changed, with officers showing a mix of relief and determination. The room is brighter, symbolizing the new era of transparency and accountability that Marcus and Jack have ushered in. In the small city of Fairview, Officer Jack Nolan, a seasoned and respected policeman with a reputation for being tough, has always believed in strict law enforcement. He views his role as a protector of the community, but his deep-seated biases have led him to make assumptions that often go unchecked. Jack is a tall, rugged man in his early 40s, with a military-style crew cut and a demeanor that commands attention. His partner, Officer Sam Whitaker, a younger, more idealistic cop, admires Jack but is troubled by his rigid views. One day, a radio call comes in about a robbery in progress, and the suspect description matches a black man in his late 30s. Jack and Sam rush to the scene, where Jack quickly apprehends a man fitting the description, Dr. Marcus Thompson, a calm and composed individual who insists he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jack, dismissing Marcus's protests, arrests him without a second thought, following what he believes is standard protocol. It isn't until they arrive at the station that Jack realizes the grave mistake he's made. Dr. Marcus Thompson is not only innocent, but is also the newly appointed police chief, known for his groundbreaking work in community policing. The shock of this revelation sends ripples through the department, causing officers to question their own biases and practices. As Jack grapples with the consequences of his actions, Dr. Thompson takes him aside for a private conversation. Instead of reprimanding Jack, Marcus offers him an unexpected opportunity to work closely with him on reforming the department, starting with confronting his own biases. Marcus, a tall, imposing figure with a commanding presence, is both authoritative and compassionate, embodying the very change the department needs. Jack, struggling with guilt and a growing sense of responsibility, reluctantly agrees. But as they begin working together, Jack uncovers a shocking secret. The robbery that led to Marcus's arrest was a setup orchestrated by corrupt officers within the department who fear Marcus's reformative agenda. These officers, led by a powerful figure in the department, are determined to discredit Marcus and maintain the status quo. Now, Jack must navigate the treacherous waters of betrayal within his own ranks, while also coming to terms with the deep-seated prejudices he's held for years. As he delves deeper into the conspiracy, Jack realizes that his fight is not just to clear Marcus's name, but to save the soul of the department he once thought he knew. Emotional hook. Jack's journey from a man entrenched in his biases to one who must confront the corruption in his own department is fraught with tension and moral dilemmas. His struggle is not only against the forces conspiring against Marcus, but also against his own internalized beliefs, making the stakes deeply personal and emotionally resonant. Plot twist. In the climactic final act, it is revealed that the corrupt officers have set their sights on eliminating Marcus permanently, fearing that his reforms will expose their decades-long misconduct. Jack, now fully aware of the depth of the corruption and his role in Marcus's wrongful arrest, must risk everything to save Marcus from an assassination attempt. The twist lies in the discovery that one of the most trusted officers in the department, someone Jack considered a mentor, is the mastermind behind the conspiracy. Jack must choose between loyalty to his old ideals or a newfound commitment to justice, leading to a heart-stopping final showdown that will determine the future of the department and the community it serves. Compelling reason for involvement. Jack's initial involvement is driven by his rigid adherence to protocol, but as he unravels the conspiracy, his motivation shifts to one of redemption and a desire to protect the very person he wronged, ultimately leading him to a path of self-discovery and transformation. In the city of Fairview, Officer Jack Nolan has spent years upholding the law with an unyielding hand. Known for his no-nonsense approach to policing, Jack's reputation precedes him as a man who sees the world in black and white, until one fateful day shatters his perceptions forever. Responding to a routine robbery call, Jack arrests a man who fits the suspect's description, a black man in his late 30s who insists on his innocence. But when Jack brings the suspect to the station, he's hit with a shocking truth. The man he's arrested is Dr. Marcus Thompson, the newly appointed police chief, celebrated for his commitment to reforming law enforcement from within. Faced with the reality of his own bias and the consequences of his actions, Jack is thrust into an unlikely partnership with Marcus. As the two men work together to heal a department plagued by prejudice and corruption, Jack begins to uncover a sinister plot within his own ranks, one designed to destroy Marcus and derail his reformative agenda. Torn between loyalty to his fellow officers and a growing sense of responsibility to the truth, Jack must confront the darker side of the badge he's worn for years. As he digs deeper, he realizes the stakes are higher than he ever imagined. Corruption runs deep, and those behind it will stop at nothing to maintain their power. With time running out, Jack faces an impossible choice: continue down the path of destruction or risk everything to protect the man he once wronged. In a heart-pounding race against the clock, Jack must decide where his true loyalty lies before it's too late. The Thin Blue Truth is a gripping tale of redemption, justice, and the high cost of uncovering the truth. In this powerful and emotional thriller, the line between right and wrong is blurred, and one man's journey to confront his own demons will lead him to a revelation that could change everything. This structure provides a chapter-by-chapter breakdown with the key physical descriptions, backstories, and settings that shape the progression of the story. Each chapter builds on the last, reflecting the character's development and the evolving atmosphere within the story's major settings. The afternoon sun beat down on the streets of Fairview, casting long shadows across the pavement. Inside the patrol car, Officer Jack Nolan glanced at his partner, Officer Sam Whitaker, who was flipping through a newspaper in the passenger seat. The hum of the car's engine was the only sound between them, a comfortable silence that often filled their shifts. "You hear about the new chief?" Sam asked, not looking up from the paper. Jack shook his head, his eyes scanning the street for any signs of trouble. "Nope, just hoping he's not another pencil pusher." Sam snorted, finally tearing his gaze away from the headlines. "You and me both." Before Jack could respond, the radio crackled to life, cutting through their banter with a burst of static. "All units, we have a 10 to 31 in progress at the corner of 4th and Maple. Suspect is a black male, late 30s, wearing a dark hoodie." Jack's instincts kicked in immediately. He straightened in his seat, his hand already moving to the siren switch. "That's close," he muttered, glancing at Sam. "Let's check it out." Sam nodded, the easygoing look on his face replaced by a steely determination. Jack flipped on the siren, and the patrol car surged forward, weaving through the afternoon traffic. The city blurred past in a haze of motion and sound, the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through Jack's veins as they sped toward the scene. They arrived at the corner of 4th and Maple within minutes, the tires screeching as Jack pulled the car to a stop at the curb outside a small convenience store. Jack jumped out, his eyes immediately scanning the area. The intersection was bustling with activity. People walking by, cars idling at the lights. But his attention was drawn to a man emerging from the store, fitting the description given over the radio. "There he is," Jack muttered, motioning to Sam. The man, dressed in a dark hoodie, had just spotted them. His expression shifted from one of casual indifference to surprise as he realized the officers were heading straight for him. The man started walking briskly down the street, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Jack quickened his pace, calling out, "Sir, stop right there." The man turned, his face calm but wary. "Can I help you, officers?" Jack approached him, his hand resting on the holstered weapon at his side. "We received a report about a robbery. Need to see some ID." The man raised an eyebrow, his voice steady. "A robbery? I haven't done anything wrong." "ID, please," Jack insisted, the weight of his duty pressing down on him. The man sighed, reaching into his pocket to pull out a wallet. "My name is Marcus Reed," he said, handing over his driver's license. Jack barely glanced at the ID before continuing. "And what were you doing in that store?" "Buying a drink," Marcus replied evenly. "Is that a crime?" Jack ignored the comment, his focus on completing the arrest. "Turn around, hands on the wall." Marcus complied, his face a mask of calm as Jack cuffed him. Sam stood by, watching the scene unfold with an air of indifference, though a flicker of doubt crossed his features. As they escorted Marcus to the patrol car, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. But he pushed it aside, convinced he was doing the right thing. They drove back to the station in silence, the city passing by outside the windows. Marcus sat quietly in the back seat, seemingly unbothered by the situation. Jack tried to justify his actions in his mind, reminding himself of the call they had received. He was just following protocol. The station buzzed with activity as they pulled into the parking lot. Jack and Sam led Marcus inside, where several officers turned to watch the new arrival with interest. The air was thick with anticipation, curiosity evident on every face. "Take him to processing," Jack instructed Sam, who nodded and moved to comply. But before they could take another step, Marcus spoke up, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. "I think it's time to clear up this misunderstanding." Jack frowned, confusion evident in his expression. "What misunderstanding?" Marcus smiled faintly, his eyes meeting Jack's with a calm intensity. "I'm Marcus Reed, your new chief." The room fell silent, the revelation landing like a bombshell. Jack felt the blood drain from his face as he processed the words. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile the man he had just arrested with the image of his new superior. "Chief Reed," he stammered, incredulity mingling with a growing sense of dread. Marcus nodded, his gaze steady. "Yes, and I believe we have a lot to discuss about this department's approach to policing." The weight of his mistake crashed down on Jack, leaving him speechless. Around him, whispers spread through the station like wildfire, and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The arrest that was supposed to be routine had turned into a defining moment, not just for Jack, but for the entire police department. The seeds of change had been planted, and the road ahead promised to be anything but easy. The station was filled with a tense energy as word of the new chief's arrest spread through the halls. Officers exchanged glances, and whispered conversations buzzed like static electricity. Jack stood frozen, his mind reeling from the revelation. Marcus Reed, a name that now carried a weight Jack hadn't anticipated, had been the man he mistakenly arrested. The gravity of his error gnawed at him, as he struggled to find the right words. "Chief Reed, Jack began, his voice faltering. Marcus held up a hand, silencing him with a look that was both firm and understanding. "Let's take this to my office, Officer Nolan." As Marcus led the way, the gathered officers parted to let them pass, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Jack followed, feeling the scrutiny of his colleagues with every step. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, the reality of his actions settling heavily on his shoulders. Marcus's office was a modest space, adorned with a few personal touches. A framed photo of his family, a commendation plaque on the wall, and a small potted plant by the window. The room was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "Sit," Marcus instructed, gesturing to a chair. Jack complied, his nerves frayed. "Chief, I didn't know." "I'm aware you didn't know," Marcus interrupted, his tone measured. "And that's precisely the point, Officer Nolan. This isn't just about following orders. It's about challenging our assumptions and doing better." Jack swallowed hard, the implications of Marcus's words sinking in. "I thought I was following protocol. The call, the description." Marcus leaned forward, his gaze steady. "The description was vague, and yet you assumed. That's the problem we're here to address. It's not just about following orders. It's about doing what's right." Shame washed over Jack as he nodded slowly. "I understand, Chief. I should have listened, asked questions. I'll let my assumptions take over." "Awareness is the first step toward change," Marcus said, his tone softening. "We're all here to learn, including me. This department has a history we need to confront, and it's going to take all of us working together." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez poked her head in, her expression serious but supportive. "Chief, the officers are gathered for your introduction meeting. They're expecting you." Marcus nodded and stood, motioning for Jack to follow. "Let's go." The briefing room was filled with officers, all eyes on Marcus as he entered. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the kind that came with the promise of change. Jack took a seat at the back, feeling the weight of his colleagues' gazes. "Good afternoon, everyone," Marcus began, his voice carrying a calm authority. "For those who haven't met me yet, I'm Chief Marcus Reed, and I want to address the incident earlier today." The room was silent, the air charged with expectation. "Today highlighted a challenge we face as a department," Marcus continued, his tone unwavering. "One that's not just about protocol, but about perception. We must hold ourselves to a higher standard, one that sees beyond assumptions and embraces accountability." Jack listened intently, each word resonating with him. He felt a strange mix of relief and determination, understanding that Marcus's leadership was a call to action. "I'm not here to point fingers," Marcus said, meeting the eyes of the officers around the room. "I'm here to work with each of you to foster a culture of openness, understanding, and respect. This won't happen overnight, but it will happen." The words were simple yet powerful, their impact clear in the thoughtful expressions of the gathered officers. Jack felt a flicker of hope that change was possible and that he could be part of it. As the meeting concluded, officers began to disperse, their conversations a mixture of cautious optimism and curiosity. Jack lingered for a moment, his mind still processing the day's events. "Jack," a voice called out, breaking through his thoughts. He turned to see Sergeant Ramirez approaching, her expression kind but firm. "Hey, Lisa," Jack replied, managing a weak smile. "You okay?" she asked, her concern evident. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, just processing everything. I really messed up." "We all make mistakes," Lisa nodded, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "What's important is how we learn from them. The chief is right. This is a chance for all of us to do better." Jack nodded, grateful for her support. "I know. I'm ready to learn, to change." "Good," Lisa said, giving his shoulder a squeeze. "Because we're going to need everyone on board to make this work." As Lisa walked away, Jack took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was determined to confront his biases and work toward a better future, for himself, for the department, and for the city they served. This chapter introduces the key characters, the inciting incident, and the beginning of Jack's journey. It sets the stage for the personal and professional transformation that will drive the story forward. The following morning, Jack Nolan's thoughts were still reeling from the previous day's events. The station had barely settled into its usual rhythm when he walked through the door, his uniform crisp and his expression unreadable. But inside, Jack was anything but calm. His mind kept replaying the moment when Chief Marcus Thompson, had revealed his identity. The memory burned in Jack's consciousness, an embarrassing reminder of his grave mistake. As he entered the squad room, a hush fell over the usual morning banter. Conversations paused, and eyes discreetly followed Jack as he made his way to his desk. Jack could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the whispers that had undoubtedly spread since yesterday. He kept his gaze forward, refusing to meet the curious stares, but the unease was impossible to ignore. Officer Sam Whitaker, already seated at his desk, looked up as Jack approached. His youthful face was tight with concern. "Hey, Jack," he greeted, his voice lower than usual. "How are you holding up?" Jack dropped into his chair, the tension in his shoulders evident. "I'm fine," he replied curtly, though the words felt hollow. He reached for the stack of paperwork on his desk, using the mundane task as a shield against further questions. Sam didn't push, but the worry in his eyes remained. Everyone's been talking about it. About Chief Thompson. "I'm aware," Jack muttered, keeping his focus on the forms in front of him. The last thing he needed was to dwell on the humiliation any more than he already had. Before the conversation could go any further, the door to the captain's office opened, and Sergeant Lisa Ramirez stepped out. Her sharp green eyes scanned the room, landing on Jack. She hesitated for a moment, then crossed the room with purpose. "Jack, can I see you in my office?" she asked, her tone firm but not unkind. Jack glanced up, meeting her gaze briefly before nodding. He stood, his movements stiff, and followed her back across the room. Sam watched them go, concern deepening the lines on his forehead. Lisa's office was a small, utilitarian space, with a desk that was more functional than decorative and walls adorned with various commendations and departmental plaques. She gestured for Jack to sit, taking a seat behind her desk. "Jack," she began, folding her hands on the desk in front of her, "I know yesterday was rough. No one could have seen that coming." Jack nodded, the tension in his jaw tightening. "I messed up, Sergeant. I didn't think, I just acted." Lisa leaned back slightly, her expression softening. "You followed procedure. But that's exactly why we need to talk. This isn't just about you, it's about the entire department and how we handle situations like this." Jack remained silent, his thoughts racing. He knew Lisa was right, but the admission didn't make the knot in his stomach any easier to bear. "Chief Thompson is different," Lisa continued, choosing her words carefully. "He's not like the other chiefs we've had. He's here to make changes, real changes, and we're going to have to adapt. Yesterday was just the beginning." Jack finally looked up, meeting her gaze. "I know. I just didn't expect this." "None of us did," Lisa replied, her voice steady. "But now that we're here, we need to figure out how to move forward. The chief asked me to speak with you before your meeting with him today." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "Meeting?" Lisa nodded. "He wants to talk to you in private." "Don't worry," she added quickly, seeing the flash of anxiety in Jack's eyes. "He's not out to punish you. He wants to discuss what happened and how we can learn from it." Jack swallowed, the anxiety returning in full force. "When?" "In about an hour," Lisa said. "Take a deep breath, Jack. This isn't a confrontation. It's an opportunity." Jack nodded again, though his nerves were far from settled. He rose to leave, but Lisa's voice stopped him. "Jack," she said, her tone gentler now, "you're a good cop. Don't let one mistake make you doubt that." Jack offered her a tight smile, appreciating the sentiment, even if it did little to ease the turmoil inside him. "Thanks, Lisa." With that, he left her office, the door closing softly behind him. An hour later, Jack found himself standing outside Chief Marcus Thompson's office, his hand hovering over the door handle. He took a deep breath, steeling himself before knocking. "Come in," came Marcus's calm voice from the other side. Jack pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was modest, almost understated, with a few personal touches. A framed photo of Marcus's family on the desk, a potted plant by the window, and a commendation plaque on the wall. Marcus was seated behind his desk, his expression unreadable as he looked up at Jack. "Officer Nolan," Marcus greeted, his tone neutral. "Please have a seat." Jack obeyed, lowering himself into the chair opposite the chief. He felt like a child being called into the principal's office, despite his years of experience on the force. Marcus studied him for a moment before speaking. "I understand that yesterday's events were unexpected for everyone involved." "Yes, sir," Jack replied, his voice tight. "I want you to know that I'm not here to reprimand you," Marcus continued, leaning forward slightly. "But I do want to have a candid conversation about what happened." Jack nodded, his throat dry. "I understand, Chief." Marcus's gaze was steady, almost gentle. "Officer Nolan, I've been in law enforcement for a long time. I know how easy it is to fall into certain patterns of thinking, especially when those patterns have been reinforced over years of service. But part of my job, and part of our job as officers, is to challenge those patterns." Jack listened intently, the chief's words sinking in. "I thought I was following the right procedures. The description, the call, I didn't question it. And that's the issue," Marcus said, his tone not accusatory, but instructive. "You didn't question it. You acted on an assumption. I'm not blaming you, Jack. But we need to acknowledge that those assumptions can lead to serious mistakes. Yesterday was proof of that." Jack's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. "I never meant to," he trailed off, unable to find the right words. "I know," Marcus replied, his voice softer now. "But intent isn't always the issue. It's the impact. And the impact of what happened yesterday is something we need to address. Not just for you, but for the entire department." Jack nodded, the gravity of the situation clear. "So, what happens now?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Now, we work together. I'm not here to single you out or make an example of you, Jack. I'm here to make this department better, and I need officers like you on board to do that. We'll start by addressing the root of the issue, our assumptions, our biases, and we'll go from there." Jack felt a strange mix of relief and trepidation. "What does that mean for me?" "It means you'll be part of the solution," Marcus said, his tone firm but encouraging. "I'll be asking you to participate in some of the initiatives I'm planning. Training sessions, community outreach programs. It's not just about changing how we police. It's about changing how we think." Jack absorbed the words, realizing the depth of what was being asked of him. This was more than just a meeting. It was the beginning of something much larger. "I'll do whatever I can, Chief," Jack said, his voice steady. Marcus nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "That's all I ask, Jack. We're all learning here." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Marcus outlining his plans for the department's future. By the time Jack left the office, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a growing sense of responsibility. This was no longer just about his own actions. It was about the role he would play in the changes to come. After leaving the chief's office, Jack returned to his desk, where Sam was waiting, the concern still etched on his face. "How'd it go?" Sam asked quietly. Jack hesitated, then shrugged. "Better than I expected. The chief, he's not like the others." Sam raised an eyebrow. "In a good way?" "Yeah," Jack admitted, sinking into his chair. "In a good way." The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks and quiet reflection. Jack's mind kept drifting back to the conversation with Marcus, replaying the chief's words and the implications they held. The weight of his mistakes still hung over him, but now it was tempered by the knowledge that he had a chance to make things right, to be part of something bigger than just enforcing the law. As the afternoon gave way to evening, Jack found himself looking out the window, watching the city of Fairview bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. The day had been long and taxing, but it had also been a turning point. Jack knew that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges both personal and professional. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. He was not alone in this. The changes Marcus spoke of would not come easily, but they were necessary. And if Jack was going to be a part of it, he would have to start by confronting the assumptions he had carried with him for so long, assumptions that had led him to the mistake of a lifetime. But Jack was ready. He didn't know where this journey would take him, but he knew that he could no longer afford to look at the world through the same lens. It was time to see things differently, to challenge his own beliefs, and to become the officer, the man he needed to be. As the day drew to a close, Jack turned away from the window, his resolve firm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he would face them head-on, with a clear mind and a renewed sense of purpose. He had work to do. Chapter 2 continues to delve into Jack's internal conflict, while setting the stage for his evolving relationship with Chief Marcus Thompson. It explores the themes of accountability, change, and the beginning of Jack's journey towards self-awareness and transformation. The day after his meeting with Chief Marcus Thompson, Jack Nolan walked into the Fairview Police Department with a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. The events of the past few days weighed heavily on his mind, and the atmosphere at the station reflected his internal turmoil. Officers who usually greeted him with a nod or a smile now exchanged uncertain glances, and the once familiar environment felt charged with tension. Jack made his way to his desk, where Sam Whitaker was already seated. The younger officer glanced up, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Morning, Jack," Sam said, his voice cautious. "Morning," Jack replied, trying to sound normal, but the strain in his voice was evident. As Jack settled into his chair, he couldn't help but notice the quiet whispers among his colleagues. The news of his encounter with the new chief had spread like wildfire, and the uncertainty of what it meant for the department had everyone on edge. Before Jack could lose himself in his thoughts, the door to the captain's office opened, and Lieutenant Richard "Rick" Carter stepped out. A bulky man with graying hair and steely gray eyes, Rick had a presence that commanded respect. He had been a mentor to Jack in his early years on the force, and their relationship was built on mutual trust and shared values. But now, something in Rick's demeanor felt off, a subtle tension that Jack hadn't noticed before. "Jack," Rick called out, his voice deep and authoritative. "Can I see you in my office?" Jack's stomach tightened, but he nodded and stood, following Rick into the small, dimly lit office. The door closed behind them with a quiet click, shutting out the noise of the station. Rick sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable as he gestured for Jack to take a seat. Jack complied, feeling like he was being summoned by a disapproving father. "What's going on, Rick?" Jack asked, trying to sound casual, but the tension in the air was palpable. Rick leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "I've been hearing a lot about you lately, Jack. About what happened with the new chief." Jack's jaw tightened. "It was a mistake. I didn't know who he was." "I know," Rick replied, his tone surprisingly calm. "But that's not what I'm concerned about." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Rick sighed, his gaze locking onto Jack's. "This new chief, he's here to change things, Jack. And from what I've seen, you've been caught right in the middle of it." Jack felt a pang of defensiveness. "I'm just trying to do my job, Rick." Rick nodded slowly. "I know you are, but you need to be careful. This guy Thompson, he's got big plans, and not everyone in this department is going to be on board with them." Jack's mind raced as he tried to decipher Rick's words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you need to watch your back," Rick said, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "There are people here who don't like change, and they're not going to let it happen without a fight." Jack swallowed hard, the implications of Rick's warning sinking in. "You think they'll come after me?" Rick's expression softened slightly. "You're a good cop, Jack. One of the best. But you're in a dangerous position right now. You need to think about where your loyalties lie." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jack had always prided himself on his loyalty to the badge, to his fellow officers. But now, that loyalty was being tested in ways he had never imagined. "I understand," Jack said finally, his voice steady. Rick nodded, but the look in his eyes remained somber. "Just be careful, Jack. Things are changing, and not everyone's going to survive the storm." Jack stood, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. "Thanks for the advice, Rick." "Anytime," Rick replied, but his tone was distant, almost as if he were already pulling away. As Jack left the office, the unease he had felt earlier only deepened. Rick's words echoed in his mind, warning him of the dangers that lay ahead. The department was a powder keg, and it felt like all it would take was a single spark to set it off. Later that day, Jack found himself once again outside Chief Thompson's office, the door slightly ajar. He knocked lightly, and Marcus's calm voice invited him in. "Come in, Jack," Marcus said, looking up from the papers on his desk as Jack entered. Jack closed the door behind him and took a seat, feeling the tension ease slightly in the presence of the chief's steady demeanor. "I wanted to check in with you," Marcus began, his tone warm but serious. "I know things have been difficult since the incident." Jack nodded, not trusting himself to speak just yet. "I've noticed some changes in the station," Marcus continued, his gaze steady. "There's tension, more than usual, and I suspect that your colleagues are looking to you for some kind of direction." Jack frowned slightly. "Me? Why?" "Because you're respected here," Marcus replied simply. "People trust you, Jack. They look to you for cues on how to react to new situations. And right now, we're in the midst of a big change." Jack shifted in his seat, feeling the weight of Marcus's words. "What do you need from me, Chief?" Marcus leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense but kind. "I need you to help me lead this department through what's coming. There are going to be challenges, resistance from within, but if we can get the key people on board, we can make a real difference here." Jack felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pride at being asked to take on such a role, but also fear of what it might entail. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this, Chief." "I believe you are," Marcus said firmly. "You have the respect of your peers, and you understand the importance of the changes we need to make. I know it won't be easy, but I wouldn't be asking you if I didn't think you could handle it." Jack's mind raced as he considered Marcus's request. The warnings from Rick were still fresh in his mind, but so was the growing sense of responsibility he felt toward the department and toward Marcus himself. Finally, Jack nodded. "I'll do what I can, Chief." Marcus smiled, a hint of relief in his eyes. "That's all I ask, Jack. Together, we can make this department something we can all be proud of." The conversation shifted to the practicalities of the changes Marcus had in mind: training programs, community outreach, and new protocols designed to reduce bias and improve relations with the public. As Marcus spoke, Jack found himself slowly warming to the idea of being part of something bigger than just enforcing the law. For the first time, he began to see how his role as a police officer could extend beyond just maintaining order. By the time Jack left Marcus's office, the sun had dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the station. The day had been exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, but Jack knew that the real challenges were still to come. As he walked through the squad room, he noticed the subtle changes in the way his colleagues looked at him. There was a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and something else, something that Jack couldn't quite put his finger on. Sam was still at his desk, his eyes following Jack as he approached. "How did it go?" he asked quietly. Jack sat down heavily in his chair, letting out a long breath. "The chief wants me to help him lead the department through the changes." Sam's eyes widened slightly. "That's a big responsibility, Jack." "I know," Jack replied, rubbing a hand over his face. "But I'm not sure I have much of a choice." Sam hesitated, then leaned in closer. "Jack, do you really think this is going to work? I mean, with everything that's been happening, are people really going to accept this?" Jack looked at Sam, seeing the doubt in the younger officer's eyes. He understood it. Hell, he shared it. But there was something else now, a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt before. "I don't know," Jack admitted. "But I think we have to try. If we don't, things are just going to get worse." Sam nodded slowly, though the uncertainty in his expression remained. "I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out." "Yeah," Jack agreed, though he knew that it wouldn't be as simple as that. The department was on the brink of something big, something that could either save it or tear it apart. As the evening wore on, Jack's thoughts kept returning to the conversation with Rick. The warning had been clear. There were people in the department who would resist the changes, who would fight to maintain the status quo. Jack knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, not just from external threats, but from within the very ranks of the force he had served for so long. But as he sat there, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky, Jack made a silent vow to himself. He would do everything in his power to steer the department in the right direction, to support Marcus in his efforts to bring about the necessary reforms. It wouldn't be easy. It might even be impossible. But Jack knew that he had to try. Because if he didn't, the consequences could be far worse than anything he had ever imagined. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning. Chapter 3 builds on the tension and conflict established in the previous chapters, exploring Jack's growing sense of responsibility and the challenges he faces both from within the department and from his own internal struggles. The stage is set for the coming confrontation, with Jack caught between his loyalty to his fellow officers and his emerging commitment to change. The morning air inside the Fairview Police Department felt thicker than usual, charged with an undercurrent of tension that no one seemed willing to acknowledge. Officer Jack Nolan could sense at the moment he walked through the door. Conversations were hushed, and officers moved through the corridors with an air of apprehension, as if bracing for something inevitable. Jack made his way to his desk, where Sam Whitaker was already seated, his face drawn with the weight of uncertainty. Sam looked up as Jack approached, his eyes searching for any sign of reassurance, but Jack had none to offer. "You feel it too, don't you?" Sam asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded, dropping into his chair. "Yeah, I feel it." The department was in turmoil, and it was no longer just about the new chief's reforms. There was something deeper at play, a growing divide among the officers that seemed to widen with each passing day. Jack could see it in the way his colleagues interacted, the subtle shifts in behavior that spoke volumes about where their loyalties lay. As Jack began to sift through the paperwork on his desk, the door to the briefing room opened, and Sergeant Lisa Ramirez stepped out. Her sharp green eyes scanned the room, taking in the tension with a practiced ease. She made her way over to Jack, her expression unreadable. "Jack, we need to talk," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Jack exchanged a glance with Sam before following Lisa into the briefing room. The room was stark and institutional, with rows of chairs arranged neatly in front of a podium. It was a space meant for clarity and direction, but today it felt like a place where nothing was certain. Lisa closed the door behind them and turned to face Jack, her gaze steady. "I'm sure you've noticed what's happening around here." Jack crossed his arms, leaning against one of the chairs. "It's hard not to." Lisa nodded, her expression grim. "The department is splitting, Jack. There are those who support the chief's changes, and then there are those who are resisting them. Quietly for now, but it's only a matter of time before it becomes more overt." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've seen it. Hell, I've felt it. But what can we do? People are set in their ways. We can't just stand by and watch it happen," Lisa replied, her voice firm. "Marcus is trying to do something good here, and we need to support him. But more than that, we need to make sure that the department doesn't tear itself apart in the process." Jack looked at her, seeing the determination in her eyes. Lisa had always been one of the more level-headed officers, someone who could navigate the complexities of the job with a calm, steady hand. But even she seemed rattled by the current state of affairs. "What do you need from me, Lisa?" Jack asked, his voice resigned but willing. Lisa took a deep breath. "I need you to help me keep things from getting out of control. The chief is relying on you, Jack, on both of us, to be the bridge between him and the rest of the department. We need to get people on board before it's too late." Jack hesitated, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. He had always seen himself as a cop, plain and simple. But now, he was being asked to be a leader, to guide his fellow officers through a period of unprecedented change. "I'll do what I can," Jack said finally, his voice carrying a hint of resolve. Lisa offered him a small, encouraging smile. "That's all we can ask for. We'll get through this, Jack. We have to." With that, the conversation ended, and Jack found himself back at his desk, the words they had exchanged lingering in his mind. The divide in the department was growing, and the days ahead promised to be anything but easy. As the day wore on, the atmosphere in the station only grew more charged. Jack could feel the tension in the air, a sense of unease that seemed to permeate every interaction. Officers who had once been friends now exchanged terse words and guarded glances, their camaraderie replaced by suspicion. The breaking point came during an afternoon meeting in the briefing room. The room was filled with officers, their expressions a mixture of frustration and uncertainty. Marcus Thompson stood at the front, his presence commanding but not overbearing. He spoke with his usual calm authority, outlining the next steps in the department's reform initiatives. But as he spoke, Jack noticed a shift in the room. Murmurs of discontent began to ripple through the ranks, and Jack could see the resentment simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't long before one of the officers, a grizzled veteran named Officer Tom Harris, stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is all a load of crap," Tom shouted, his voice filled with years of pent-up frustration. "We're cops, not social workers. We don't need all this reform nonsense. What we need is to do our jobs without being second-guessed at every turn." A murmur of agreement spread through the room, and Jack could feel the divide deepening. Marcus remained composed, but Jack could see the tension in the chief's jaw as he prepared to respond. "Officer Harris," Marcus began, his voice steady, "I understand that change is difficult, but these reforms are necessary if we want to build trust with the community we serve." "Trust?" Tom spat, his eyes blazing. "The community doesn't trust us because they don't know what it's like out there. They don't see what we see. They don't know the risks we take every day. And now you're asking us to bend over backward to make them feel better about it? No way, Chief. No way." The room fell silent, the weight of Tom's words hanging heavily in the air. Jack could see the uncertainty in the faces of his fellow officers, the doubt that had taken root in their minds. Before Marcus could respond, Jack stood up, his voice cutting through the tension. "Tom, I get it. We all do. But this isn't about making anyone feel better. It's about doing our jobs the right way. We're here to protect and serve, and that means everyone, not just the people we're comfortable with." Tom glared at Jack, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "And what if doing it the right way gets one of us killed?" Jack held his gaze, his voice firm. "Then we need to find a better way. But we can't keep doing the same things and expect different results. This is about more than just us, Tom. It's about the future of this department." The room was silent again, the tension still thick but now tinged with a sense of uncertainty. Jack could see the impact his words had made, the way they had challenged the assumptions that had been held for so long. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Jack. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need right now." The meeting continued, but the mood had shifted. The resistance was still there, but it had been met with a challenge, one that would not be easily dismissed. The meeting ended with a sense of uneasy resolution, the officers dispersing with heavy thoughts and unresolved emotions. Jack lingered in the briefing room, his mind still processing everything that had transpired. The confrontation with Tom had been intense, but necessary. It was a moment that would set the tone for the days to come, a test of where the department's loyalties truly lay. As Jack prepared to leave, Lisa approached him, her expression one of quiet approval. "You handled that well," she said, her voice low. "Thanks," Jack replied, though he didn't feel entirely satisfied. "But I'm not sure if it made a difference." "It did," Lisa insisted. "You made them think, Jack. That's the first step." Jack nodded, though the weight of the situation still pressed heavily on his shoulders. "I just hope it's enough." "It will be," Lisa said with quiet conviction. "We're in this together, remember? We'll make it through." Jack offered her a faint smile, appreciating the support even as doubts lingered in his mind. The day had been long and grueling, but it was only the beginning of the challenges they would face. The department was in turmoil, and the road ahead was uncertain, fraught with obstacles that could tear them apart if they weren't careful. But as Jack left the station that evening, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He had taken the first steps toward bridging the divide, and though the path was difficult, he knew he couldn't turn back now. The future of the department, and perhaps even his own, depended on it. Chapter 4 delves deeper into the growing tension within the Fairview Police Department, exploring the divide that threatens to tear the force apart. Jack's role as a leader begins to take shape as he confronts the resistance to change, setting the stage for the challenges that lie ahead. The stakes are raised, and the characters are pushed to their limits as they navigate the turbulent waters of reform and loyalty. The morning air was cool and crisp as Officer Jack Nolan walked into the Fairview Police Department, his mind still processing the events of the past few days. The tension in the station had not dissipated, but something had shifted within Jack himself. The doubts and fears that had plagued him were still there, but now they were tempered by a growing sense of resolve. Jack made his way to his desk, where Sam Whitaker was already seated. The younger officer looked up as Jack approached, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Morning, Jack," Sam said cautiously. "Morning," Jack replied, his tone more assured than it had been in days. Sam hesitated, then asked, "You doing okay?" Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, Sam. I think I'm starting to figure some things out." Sam looked relieved, though the uncertainty in his eyes remained. "That's good to hear. We need someone who can help steady the ship around here." Jack appreciated the sentiment, but knew that steadying the ship was easier said than done. The department was still reeling from the changes Marcus Thompson was implementing, and the resistance from some of the officers was growing more vocal. Before Jack could respond, the door to the chief's office opened, and Marcus stepped out. His presence commanded attention, and the room seemed to quiet as he approached Jack's desk. "Jack, can I have a word?" Marcus asked, his tone calm but firm. Jack nodded and followed Marcus back into his office. The space was modest, with just a few personal touches that reflected Marcus's disciplined and focused nature. A framed photo of his family sat on the desk, alongside a small potted plant that added a touch of warmth to the otherwise sparse room. Marcus gestured for Jack to sit, and once they were both seated, he spoke. "I want to thank you for your support during the meeting yesterday. I know it wasn't easy." Jack shook his head. "It needed to be said, Chief. We can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's exactly right. And that's why I want to talk to you about the next steps. We've started making changes, but there's still a lot of work to be done." Jack leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus met Jack's gaze, his eyes steady. "I want you to be my liaison with the officers. They trust you, Jack. If they see you working with me, it'll go a long way toward getting them on board with the reforms." Jack considered the request, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. He had never seen himself as a leader, just a cop doing his job. But now Marcus was asking him to step up in a way he had never expected. "I'll do it," Jack said finally, his voice firm. "But I'm going to need your help, Chief. This isn't going to be easy." With the conversation concluded, Jack left Marcus's office with a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. Later that afternoon, Jack and Marcus visited the Fairview Community Center, a brightly colored building in the heart of one of the city's most diverse neighborhoods. The center was bustling with activity, with children playing in the courtyard and adults participating in various programs designed to strengthen the community. As they entered the building, Jack couldn't help but notice the difference in atmosphere compared to the police station. Here, there was a sense of hope and optimism that seemed to contrast sharply with the tension he had grown accustomed to at work. Marcus led Jack to a room where a group of local leaders had gathered to discuss the new community outreach initiatives. The room was filled with people from all walks of life: teachers, business owners, activists, each one committed to making Fairview a better place. As Marcus introduced Jack to the group, Jack felt a mixture of pride and trepidation. He had spent so many years enforcing the law, often seeing the community as an adversary rather than a partner. But now, he was being asked to work with these people, to listen to their concerns and find ways to build trust. The meeting began with a discussion about the upcoming Youth Mentorship Program, an initiative Marcus had been championing since his arrival. The program was designed to provide at-risk youth with positive role models, officers who could offer guidance and support, rather than just discipline. Jack listened intently as the group discussed the logistics of the program, his mind racing with ideas about how to make it work. He had seen firsthand the challenges facing many of the young people in Fairview, and he knew how important it was to reach them before they became statistics. When it was his turn to speak, Jack cleared his throat, feeling the weight of the room's attention on him. "I've been in law enforcement for a long time," he began, his voice steady. "And I'll be the first to admit that we haven't always done a good job of connecting with the community. But I'm here because I want to change that. I want to help these kids see that we're not just here to arrest them. We're here to help them." The room was silent as Jack spoke, and when he finished, he saw a few nods of agreement from the people around the table. It wasn't a grand speech, but it was honest, and Jack could feel the shift in the room, a small step toward building the bridges that Marcus had talked about. After the meeting, Marcus pulled Jack aside. "You did well in there," he said, his voice warm with approval. "Thanks, Chief," Jack replied, though he couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. "I just hope we can get through to them." "We will," Marcus said confidently. "It's not going to happen overnight, but we're making progress. And that's what matters." Jack nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. The partnership between him and Marcus was still in its early stages, but it was clear that they were beginning to make a difference. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Jack was starting to believe that they could succeed. When Jack returned to the station later that day, the atmosphere was still tense, but there was a subtle shift in the way his colleagues interacted with him. Word had spread about his involvement in the community outreach initiatives, and while some officers were skeptical, others seemed genuinely interested in what he was doing. Sam was waiting for him at his desk, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "How did it go?" "Good," Jack replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "We're starting to make some headway with the community." Sam nodded slowly, though the uncertainty in his eyes remained. "That's great, Jack. But you know there are still a lot of people here who aren't on board with this." Jack sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I know, but we have to keep pushing forward. If we don't, things are just going to get worse." Sam hesitated, then said, "Jack, I'm with you on this. I just want you to be careful. There are some people here who don't like what you're doing, and they're not going to sit back and let it happen." Jack looked at Sam, seeing the genuine concern in his partner's eyes. "I'll be careful, Sam, but we have to do this. It's the only way we're going to make things better." Sam nodded, though the worry in his expression didn't fade. "Just watch your back, okay?" "I will," Jack promised, though he knew that watching his back was easier said than done. The resistance within the department was real, and it was only a matter of time before it would come to a head. As the days passed, Jack and Marcus continued to work closely together, implementing the reforms and community outreach programs that Marcus had envisioned. The partnership between the two men grew stronger, with Jack gradually shedding the rigid mindset that had once defined him. But as they made progress, the resistance within the department also grew more organized. Rumors began to circulate about a group of officers who were actively working to undermine Marcus's efforts, and Jack could feel the tension in the station mounting with each passing day. One afternoon, as Jack was preparing to leave for another meeting at the community center, he was approached by Lieutenant Richard "Rick" Carter. The older officer's expression was unreadable, but there was a subtle edge to his voice as he spoke. "Jack, can we talk for a minute?" Rick asked, his tone casual, but with an undercurrent of something else. "Sure, Rick," Jack replied, though he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his gut. Rick led Jack to a quiet corner of the station, away from the prying eyes of their colleagues. Once they were alone, Rick leaned in slightly, his voice low. "I've been hearing things," Rick said, his eyes locking onto Jack's. "Things about what you and the chief have been up to." Jack frowned, his guard immediately going up. "What are you getting at, Rick?" "I'm just saying that not everyone's happy with the direction things are going," Rick replied, his tone carefully neutral. "There are some people here who think we should be focusing on law enforcement, not playing social worker." Jack's jaw tightened. "We're trying to make the department better, Rick. You've seen what's been happening. Things can't keep going the way they have been." Rick nodded slowly, though his expression remained guarded. "Maybe, but just be careful, Jack. When you start making changes, you make enemies. And some of those enemies are closer than you think." The warning hung in the air, heavy with implications that Jack couldn't ignore. He watched as Rick walked away, the older officer's words echoing in his mind. Jack knew that the path he had chosen was fraught with danger, but there was no turning back now. The reforms were necessary, and he was committed to seeing them through, no matter the cost. But as he left the station that evening, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. The partnership between him and Marcus was strong, but the forces arrayed against them were growing more formidable by the day. And in the shadows of the department, a storm was brewing, one that would test Jack's resolve in ways he had never imagined. Chapter 5 explores the developing partnership between Jack and Marcus as they work to implement the necessary reforms in the Fairview Police Department. It also introduces the growing threat posed by the resistance within the department, setting the stage for the conflicts to come. The chapter balances moments of hope and progress with the looming danger, building tension as the story moves forward.